Today, I present to you a world where with power and money, you can do anything. But someone who has nothing appears and beats everyone. Beats men, beats women, beats those who hit women too. Let's go. The Valhalla Academy stood among the top 3 hunter institutes in the world. Every year, countless hunters attempted to gain admission, but with a brutal success rate of just 1 in 500, only a handful made it through. Even among those successful candidates, merely 150 students managed to graduate, making the Academy's difficulty feel no different from the harshness of real life. On the very first day of class, chaos already filled the training grounds. Groups of candidates fought freely, with no strict rules holding them back. Some stood empty-handed, while others wielded swords. Yet the clashes continued without hesitation. Overseeing this intense scene was the senior combat instructor, Lee Sang-cheol. After some time, a man named Yu Min-jun arrived, intent on observing a candidate from his family who was considered worthy of everyone's attention. That candidate was Yu So-yeon of the Yushin family, one of the 5 most prestigious families in Korea. Anyone who crossed paths with her was swiftly defeated, thanks to her exceptional talent with both mana and the sword. Although she was clearly a promising talent, she failed to attract significant interest from the instructor at first. However, the moment it was revealed that her family had successfully communicated with a constellation guardian, his attention was immediately captured. In this world, 5 chosen beings existed as constellation guardians. It was completely normal for hunters to receive blessings and protection from these guardians, or even form contracts with them. Each guardian possessed a distinct power. The Yushin family was connected to the god of the sword, the Jangsan family to the god of spirits, the Jin Choi family to the god of martial arts, the Oseon family to the god of fists, and the Gion family to the god of the bow. Since Yu So-yeon had already communicated with a guardian, she was regarded as a remarkable genius with overwhelming potential. Many believed that passing the academy test would be effortless for her. The event carried such importance that the entire world watched through live cameras. Her opponent in this highly anticipated match was Kim Juyok, the story's protagonist, who was also 17 years old. Even the instructors found themselves surprised by how calm the boy appeared, fully aware of the formidable opponent standing before him. Certain of her easy victory, So-yeon drew her sword as the fight began. Yet, the boy was nowhere to be seen at first. Without hesitation, she launched her attack. Her swordsmanship was extraordinary, her control over mana flawless, and every strike landed with precise intent. Guys, believe it or not, he just punched her in the chest and won the fight. Our protagonist was even disappointed with the fight. 300 years ago, Kim Juyok had stood as the strongest man on earth, a warrior so overwhelmingly powerful that even constellations lined up to become his disciples. He had single-handedly cleared the Tower of Destruction and slain its final boss, saving the world in the process. Yet the collapsing tower dragged him down with it, and claimed his life as well. In the very next moment, he opened his eyes 3 centuries into the future. He accepted the second chance without much complaint, even though his new body was far younger and far weaker than the one he once possessed, because his skills and memories as the martial god remained completely intact. Believing he could simply live more casually this time, he intended to take things slow. But that idea shattered the instant. A system screen appeared before him with a warning that the Tower of Destruction would rise again in 5 years. Regret struck him hard, as he realized he truly should have thrown Barge into the lava when he had the opportunity, and now history itself seemed to be arranging a rematch. With firm determination, he resolved that this time he would destroy the tower so thoroughly that nothing would remain. Another message surfaced and instructed him to retrieve his weapons and memories from the 3rd floor, 5th room to the right, within Valhalla. While the importance of reclaiming his weapons was obvious to him, the mention of memories left him confused, though his immediate priority was simple and clear since he first needed to locate Valhalla. On the 4th day at Valhalla, the top 10 competition began, and an announcement summoned all participants to the arena. Upon hearing it, Kim briefly debated whether attending was even worth his time, but in the end, he stepped forward to face his opponent. Instructor Lee noticed that the arena had gathered an unusually massive crowd, because the fate of the 5 great families seemed to converge in that very moment. Much of the attention centered on a rising star named Oh Se-hyuk, the eldest son of the Oh-sun family. Se-hyuk studied Kim carefully, and remembered that he was the same fighter who had defeated So-yeon on the first day, although he could not recall seeing much of him before that. He understood that a victory here would skyrocket his prestige and reputation, and with a confident smirk, he declared his intention to crush him as the match officially began. Se-hyuk might have lacked skill in literature, strategy, or refined martial arts technique, yet he possessed a natural talent that no one else could match. Even with minimal training, and without relying on mana, his strength grew at an explosive rate that allowed him to perform feats beyond the limits of most warriors, and his exceptional physique required no effort to maintain, making him a born combat genius. The fight opened with blatant disrespect as Kim casually flipped him off, which instantly pushed the larger fighter into a mana-fueled rage. Se-hyuk charged forward, and although Kim acknowledged that the man possessed frightening raw physical strength, he understood better than anyone that building muscles did not automatically grant real fighting skill. When a massive haymaker came swinging toward him, Kim barely tilted his head aside and allowed the punch to slice through empty air, making his opponent look ridiculous. He immediately punished the failed strike with a sharp low kick that destroyed Se-hyuk's balance, and before the bigger man could even process that he was falling, Kim followed with a brutal palm strike that slammed him straight into the ground. Standing over him, Kim felt mild irritation because his current teenage body clearly lagged far behind the god-tier stats he once commanded, yet he remained unconcerned since he knew his mind carried enough experience and strategic brilliance to compensate for weaker muscles, and he was fully prepared to climb back to the top of the hunter rankings. The arena erupted into chaos as reporters scrambled frantically to understand how an unknown fighter had just dismantled a top prospect. From the stands, First King, Chulshin, head of the Osun family, watched his son's humiliation unfold. He could not comprehend how Se-hyuk, a fighter built purely for overwhelming power, had failed to dodge such a basic rookie attack. Realizing he had lost control, by unleashing a rare burst of magic in hopes of ending the match instantly, shifting his weight with confidence that Kim would be caught off guard. However, from the very moment Se-hyuk initiated his move, Kim had already calculated a counterattack, as his ability to anticipate and strategize far surpassed the competition. Chulshin, now fully aware of the boy's extraordinary potential, boldly declared that he would bring Kim into the Osun family at any cost. Meanwhile, the crowd completely lost its composure over Arin Choi, yet Kim found the obsession strange, and could not understand why everyone was so fixated on a 17-year-old. When he finally stepped into the ring against the Choi family's second daughter, he began the match in his usual relaxed manner, and quickly noticed that Arin was deliberately waiting, clearly hoping he would make the first move. The silent standoff soon bored him, so he casually started walking toward her, and the moment he closed the distance, Arin drew her blade infused with the legendary lightning power of the Choi family. The audience erupted in shock, stunned that someone so young had already mastered such an advanced technique. Arin lunged forward with a lightning-fast swing, but before her sword could finish cutting through the air, Kim had already disappeared from her sight. He reappeared calmly at her side, and mocked her for telegraphing the attack simply by looking at the spot she intended to strike, then delivered a light punch that sent her sliding across the arena, despite her managing to block it with her sword. Kim felt mildly impressed that she possessed the reflexes to defend against the hit at all, while Arin trembled as the realization sank in that she was facing an absolute monster. Before she could organize her thoughts, Kim dropped a 1-inch punch straight onto her blade, and the sheer force slammed her into the ground. Standing over her, he found her sword style oddly familiar but did not dwell on it, because with that victory, he had just claimed the #1 position in the rankings. Naturally, the media storm erupted immediately as reporters swarmed him in desperation for interviews or even a single quote, nearly tripping over each other while promising elite status and luxurious treatment if he agreed to join their organizations. Kim, however, cared very little and found the relentless questioning irritating, and when he lashed out at the press, social media exploded with discussions about his outburst and accusations that he had grown arrogant after reaching the top rank. Soon after, the top 10 members were formally welcomed into Valhalla, though the entire process felt painfully dull to Kim. He remembered the system screen instructing him to retrieve his weapons and memories from room 5 on the 3rd floor, and saw no reason to linger when he could simply collect what he needed and leave. Once the entrance ceremony concluded, the students were escorted to a virtual combat simulation room, where their instructor, Lee Goon, the former head of the Choi Guild, examined the class arrangement with visible confusion. Sitting in the front row were 3 prodigies from the 5 great families: Soyeon of the Yushin family, Arin of the Choi family, and Se-hyuk of the Oseon family. Despite the claim that the selection had been random, the instructor found it suspicious that so many extraordinary talents had been grouped together, and Kim's presence in the same class only deepened his concern. Sensing potential trouble, he decided he needed to assert authority immediately. After introducing himself as the class instructor, he abruptly pressed a button that threw everyone into chaos. Confusion spread as the students suddenly found themselves standing in an open courtyard, while the instructor erected a protective barrier that concealed them from nearby monsters. As the class struggled to comprehend the dangerous environment, the instructor asked Kim whether he could handle all the monsters alone. Kim confirmed without hesitation, but the instructor interpreted that confidence as arrogance, since most students had only ever read about monsters and had never faced one in reality. Expecting the boy's ego to crumble, he urged him to stop pretending and admit he could not do it so they could move forward. Instead of backing down, Kim simply smiled, which irritated the instructor enough to demand what he found so amusing. Now intrigued, Kim questioned why such a trial was happening on the very first day, and suspected there must be a reward attached, so he asked what he would gain from completing the challenge. The instructor proposed a deal that if Kim fought the monsters, he would grant whatever request the boy made in return. After a brief moment of consideration, Kim accepted. The instructor, still unconvinced by the hype surrounding him, made a sarcastic remark, suggesting the kid had no idea how dangerous the simulation monsters truly were. Kim ignored the attitude entirely, and instead asked where his equipment was. Once he was finally given a sword, Kim stepped forward, looking completely unfazed. Every eye locked onto him as he drew the blade, charged the monsters, and with a single clean swing utterly shredded them. Wave after wave fell before him, and as he fought, he recalled that it had been 3 years since he last wielded a sword, yet the weapon still felt perfectly natural in his grip. Back then, monsters had thrown the world into chaos and forced humanity to rely on whatever weapons they could obtain, though the sword had remained one of the most trusted and widely used choices. Lost in that thought, he suddenly sensed a creature creeping up behind him and struck it down instantly before it could even touch him. Watching the battle unfold, the instructor grew deeply intrigued and wondered how such an ordinary sword, with no magical traits, allowed Kim to slice through monsters so effortlessly, almost as though the blade itself were absorbing them. Nearby, the 3 elite heirs from the great families observed the spectacle with equal fascination. After finishing off the remaining creatures, Kim approached the instructor and reminded him of their agreement. With the session now complete, the instructor acknowledged it as their first class and suggested the students return to their dormitories for some rest. Kim, however, considered the lesson unnecessarily long and cared only about retrieving what belonged to him before leaving, since he had never intended to live as a student and held no interest in formal education. Even so, despite his boredom, he managed to pick up some valuable knowledge, especially regarding constellations. In this world, constellations were far more than distant stars, as they symbolized beings who had attained immense power and ascended to godhood. Many of these entities were connected to hunters and functioned like divine artifacts that granted extraordinary abilities, and within Korea, their importance was especially profound. Valhalla ranked as the 3rd largest academy in the world and housed countless relics associated with these constellations. Kim, however, saw little worth in focusing on swordsmanship or hunting monsters, and believed his time would be better invested in martial arts training because his current body was still weak. While lost in this thought, he sensed someone trailing behind him, and when he turned, he found Arin standing there. Elsewhere, inside the teacher's office, Lee San, Valhalla's highest-ranking instructor, discussed the young boy with the class instructor and admitted that it was difficult to believe a mere high school student could accomplish such astonishing feats. The instructor revealed that he had deliberately released 120 virtual monsters during the combat simulation, expecting it to pose a serious challenge, yet Kim had eliminated every single one, despite never having faced real monsters before. Their conversation shifted toward Kim's background, and Lee San observed that the boy lacked any obvious exceptional traits, which only made his performance more puzzling. When asked about his past, Lee San explained that Kim was an orphan who had grown up in a dangerous region. The instructor briefly suspected that he might be a forger, but Lee San dismissed the theory, stating he had conducted a thorough investigation and found no sign of deception, and he further questioned why a forger would attempt to enter Valhalla only to attract attention during the entrance ceremony. Lee San then mentioned Kim's desire to access the Constellation room, which the instructor confirmed, noting that the boy intended to enter it after the first semester. To support this request, Lee San had already sought permission from the headmaster to allow Kim access to the first-floor basement, while personally taking responsibility for him. Although the instructor appreciated the effort, he voiced concern about the restrictions placed on the upper floors, but Lee San reassured him that reaching the first floor should not be difficult if Kim moved quickly. The instructor remained uneasy about the challenges ahead, particularly since his class already contained 3 elite students from the top families. Yet Lee San attempted to calm him by bringing up an exchange student from the Ventric family assigned to another class. The moment the instructor heard that Rockdill Ventric, who had been expelled from the British Academy for misconduct, was now enrolled, he felt a strange sense of relief, knowing his situation could have been worse. Meanwhile, when Kim turned to identify his follower, he came face to face with Arin, the Choi family's daughter, who approached him with a request that he teach her swordsmanship. As he turned away, she persisted and repeated the request, but he refused immediately, and when she demanded a reason, he sharply questioned her insistence. Growing frustrated, he made it clear he had no intention of teaching her before walking off. The following day in class, Kim reflected on his ongoing struggle with magic and his inability to properly control mana, realizing that overcoming this weakness was essential for his growth. While absorbed in thought, he noticed someone standing before him. It was Rockdill Ventric, accompanied by his attendant, Yuria de Felix. Kim questioned who they were, and Rockdill, visibly surprised by the boy's ignorance, introduced himself as a member of the powerful Ventric family before bluntly asking whether Kim desired power. In most noble families, branch members fought endlessly for influence against the main lineage, yet the Ventric family operated differently. They possessed the guardian constellation known as the Beak Mask, which granted them distinctive advantages, and instead of relying solely on constellation guardians for protection like other elite families, they had chosen an unconventional path by forming contracts with outsiders, enabling them to select members without internal conflict. This strategy solidified their dominance across Europe and allowed branch members to wield authority equal to that of the main family. Rockdill, arrogant because of this status, had previously been expelled from the British Academy for causing trouble, yet he brushed aside any concern about his past and boasted that his family could resolve any problem, insisting that as a Ventric, he always obtained whatever he desired. Impressed by Kim's performance at the entrance ceremony, he offered him a position at his side, along with access to the Ventric family's constellation, but the boy rejected the proposal without hesitation, which immediately provoked Rockdill's anger. Before tensions could escalate further, Valhalla's head instructor Lee San intervened and ordered Rockdill to return to his seat. Rockdill reprimanded him for addressing him by his full name, yet Lee San reminded him that regardless of the Ventric family's influence, Academy rules still applied. Rockdill complied but smugly warned Kim that they would meet again after class. Later, while returning to his dorm, Kim felt irritated that he had made no progress toward reaching the Constellation room, and he recalled his earlier encounter with Rockdill, during which he had learned that guild scouts and outsiders were already gathering information about him within the academy. As he tried to clear his thoughts, he once again sensed a tail and turned to discover Arin following him yet again, still pleading for sword lessons, but he had completely run out of patience and bluntly reminded her that he had already refused. Across the campus, the atmosphere darkened considerably as Rockdill spiraled into a furious meltdown and smashed a lantern in pure rage, unable to tolerate that an unknown orphan like Kim had embarrassed him before everyone. Consumed by anger, he ordered his assistant Yuria to summon Desera immediately, clearly plotting something malicious to settle the score. When Yuria hesitated and remained motionless, he grabbed her by the hair, questioned her loyalty, and threatened expulsion from the family. Despite her denial, he hurled her to the ground and demanded she contact Desera at once, instructing her to inform Desera Ventric, a second-grade member of the royal family, that he wished to meet him, and with silent obedience, Yuria nodded and carried out the order. Meanwhile, inside his dorm room, Kim sat alone and ran his hands across his body, while acknowledging its clear limitations, since he possessed no magical talent and could not wield overwhelming strength. As his thoughts drifted, he remembered his earlier encounter with Arin when he had caught her following him, and upon confronting her, he demanded to know why she kept trailing behind him. Arin once again asked him to teach her swordsmanship, steadily testing his patience until his irritation surfaced, and he compared her persistence to that of a parrot. Then, completely out of nowhere, Kim demanded 10 million won per lesson, which instantly silenced her, and he claimed she could never afford such a price before turning to walk away. She suddenly asked for his phone, and when he questioned her reason with suspicion, she explained that she needed to enter her number to make transferring money easier. The moment he glanced at the screen, shock hit him as he saw that she had transferred 100 million won, after which she calmly asked again whether he would teach her. Despite the staggering amount, he refused both the money and her request, remaining confident that he could earn money elsewhere as he prepared to leave. Now back in the present, his determination guided him toward exploring the secret vault, and his mind raced with memories of scouting the area before enrolling at Valhalla. He understood that most of the notes he had hidden 3 centuries earlier were likely lost, yet research indicated that at least 4 should still exist, with 3 probably buried deep within the mountains surrounding Valhalla. With firm resolve, he began the search, and used his limited magical power to track magical marbles that reacted to his energy, leading him directly to the location where he had buried his stash long ago. The digging proved to be an exhausting grind that left him drenched in sweat and thoroughly annoyed, and he mentally scolded his past self for choosing such an inconvenient hiding place while wishing he had made things easier for his future self to withdraw the treasure. This entire hunt had been a necessity born during the chaos of the Tower of Destruction, when the collapsing world offered no safe location to store his belongings, forcing him to bury his fortune underground. Just as the sun began to rise, he finally struck something solid and unearthed a chest, only to encounter another problem when he realized the ancient lock could not be opened with any ordinary key. Without wasting time, he manipulated his mana to craft a makeshift key from a simple piece of string, and although the process demanded patience and careful finesse, he was eventually rewarded with the satisfying click of the mechanism unlocking. When the hidden chamber swung open, he was greeted by a mountain of wealth, impressive enough to shame a king, and he smirked at the glittering treasure, while sarcastically wondering if his riches had missed him over the past few hundred years. The sight brought him immediate relief, because money was no longer a concern, and his attention soon shifted to several storage stones that awakened memories of how he had infused them with magic to safeguard his notes. Recognizing their importance, he decided they would be useful, and the instant he picked one up, a surge of energy pulsed from it, confirming their potency. He briefly considered handling the stones first, but paused when he noticed the difference between the heavy gold bars and the delicate jewelry, prompting him to weigh whether prioritizing the lighter valuables might be the smarter choice. Back at Valhalla Academy, the strain lingering in his muscles from the excavation forced him to pause, and at that moment Arin approached and sat beside him, once again requesting swordsmanship training. Irritated, he questioned her relentless persistence and reminded her that the Choi lineage already held a powerful reputation in swordsmanship, making it unnecessary for her to seek guidance from him when elite training was readily available. Yet she continued to insist, and his curiosity grew regarding her unwavering determination, leading him to press her for an explanation and ask why she chose him over her own father, a respected figure within the Choi family. Their exchange was abruptly interrupted by the arrival of the instructor, who summoned Kim to the teacher's room, and sensing that something significant was at hand, he asked for the reason. The instructor revealed that it related to a question Kim had asked earlier, and after a brief hesitation, Kim agreed to follow. As he prepared to leave, Arin called out to him, and when he turned back and noticed the confusion written across her face, he responded by extending an invitation for her to join a training session the next morning at 6 a.m. Caught off guard, Arin hesitated for a moment before nodding and accepting the offer. Inside the teacher's room, the instructor immediately got to the point and informed Kim that his request to enter the Constellation room had been approved, though with a strict limitation that he could only access the basement floor and nothing below it. Curious, Kim asked when he could visit, and the instructor suggested that he could go that very night, which Kim accepted without hesitation and surprised the instructor with his eagerness. When night arrived, the instructor led him to Valhalla Academy's heavily guarded treasure, known as the Constellation Room, and noticing the extreme level of protection, Kim remarked that the defenses there were even stronger than those at the main gate. The instructor explained that the importance of that room was exactly what made Valhalla one of the top 3 academies in the world. While admiring the massive exterior walls, Kim pointed out that they were reinforced with multiple magical protections except for the entrance, and out of curiosity he asked how someone might reach the second floor, while joking that it might require illegal methods. The old instructor clarified that such an act would not make him a criminal but would lead to immediate expulsion, and he also warned him about losing his sanity before even leaving the academy. Confused, Kim asked what he meant, and the instructor explained that the second floor was extremely dangerous because exposure to the raw power of constellations could instantly drive people mad. Watching the boy carefully, he wondered about his true intentions and whether he truly wanted to go deeper or was uncertain, and with a strict time limit, he instructed him to return within 30 minutes. Kim confidently agreed and stepped through the gate. Inside, a familiar screen appeared and directed him to retrieve his weapons and memories from the 5th room on the 3rd floor. Unbothered by the risk of expulsion, his real goal remained reaching the 3rd basement level, and as he descended, he noticed how the building seemed unnaturally vast with endless stairs and dim visibility, which made him question its true purpose and wonder whether Valhalla hid some kind of prison in its depths. Doubt crept into his mind, and he realized he needed to learn more about the Constellation Room. But suddenly, another screen appeared and informed him that he had met the conditions and would be transported to a designated room. Before he could fully process it, a heavy voice greeted him, and when he looked up, he froze in shock after seeing Barge standing before him. The Tower Master acknowledged that 300 years had passed since their last meeting, yet instead of a warm reunion, Kim reacted with pure rage and immediately threw a powerful punch while shouting about Barge having the nerve to appear again. Even though Barge tried to reason with him, Kim refused to listen and kept attacking non-stop, fueled by anger and resentment while ignoring every attempt to calm him. The Tower Master warned that he would retaliate if this continued, but Kim did not stop, and after one final punch, Barge was knocked down. Even while consumed by fury, Kim muttered that he was not usually a violent person before continuing to slam him anyway, unloading all his frustration and blaming the Tower Master for destroying his future, his wealth, his honor, and the years he had spent training disciples. He only stopped when Barge asked whether he wanted to understand more about where he was. According to the Tower Master, the space existed within a relic, and the Barge before him was only an embodiment, while the real Tower Master had died 3 centuries earlier. This revelation confused Kim and led him to ask whether Barge had always been inside the relic, and Barge excitedly confirmed it while also revealing that he had become a constellation. That answer only irritated Kim further and made him punch the Tower Master again in frustration. Outside, the instructor continued waiting until he was surprised to see Kim emerge, and when he suspiciously asked if anything strange had happened, Kim denied it, and they went their separate ways. While walking back, however, Kim could not stop thinking about his encounter with Barge. Back at the Constellation Room, Kim wondered whether Barge had been the one sending him notifications, but the Tower Master himself was unsure since he had been trapped in the relic for 300 years. According to Barge, he had also received a notification instructing him to contact the reincarnated Kim to help him regain lost memories, supposedly because of interference from a mysterious individual who had appeared. The Tower Master speculated that this unknown figure might have been responsible for making Kim the owner of the Tower of Destruction, but when Kim asked further about the mysterious person, Barge admitted he did not know because that part of his memory was missing. Kim then remembered his own notification that had told him to find a weapon and recover memories, though parts of the message had been censored and unreadable. Even so, he had never actually lost his memory since he clearly remembered everything that had happened in the tower, and Barge explained that, although he had found the weapon, his memories might still be incomplete. The space they were in contained 4 weapons, village swords filled with immense power, and Barge himself had become a constellation by using one of those swords as a relic. That revelation enraged Kim so much that he screamed at the top of his lungs. Returning to the present, Kim remained confused about his situation because he had intended to destroy the sword and leave it behind. Yet he now understood that without the weapon he could not complete the quest shown in his notification window. As Kim examined the sword, he suddenly found himself surrounded by a group of second-year seniors known as the school bullies, who called him out and declared it was time for his hazing session. Their leader was Larik, the eldest son of the prestigious Sunrise family. Completely unfazed, Kim mocked him, which enraged the bullies and pushed them to decide they would beat him down. When one of them stepped forward to attack, Kim reacted instantly and delivered a sharp kick that sent the attacker crashing away while screaming in pain. Watching their friend get launched into a wall made the rest nervous, yet Kim calmly held his ground and gripped his weapon with confidence before boldly challenging all of them to attack together. 3 hours earlier, Larik had met with Rockdill, who offered him a reward for beating Kim severely and promised that weapons could be used freely because he would personally deal with the consequences. Though hesitant at first, Larik eventually accepted the offer, and as he left the room, he reminded himself that a first-year student was still a first-year regardless of ranking. This belief came from the school system where second-year students had to enter the Constellation room and form contracts with celestial beings to become recognized second graders. Those who succeeded gained special powers, and Larik believed that as one of them, he could easily overpower Kim. Back in the present, that confidence faded quickly as he watched Kim effortlessly crush his classmates. Even so, the bullies refused to retreat and kept charging one after another. First, a fat student pulled out a mana-loaded knife, but before he could act, he was struck straight on the head. Immediately after, another bully attacked with a staff using all his strength, yet Kim calmly sidestepped and cracked him across the face in one clean motion. Seeing his companions flying helplessly, Larik was stunned because by logic, second graders should have more experience than a first grader, yet his group could not do anything against Kim. He started realizing that even though Kim held back, the damage they took was still serious. With most of them already down, Kim challenged the remaining trembling students to come forward, which pushed Larik's frustration to the limit. Furious, he drew his sword and rushed in, but before he could strike, Kim simply pressed the sheath of his still-sheathed sword into Larik's stomach and dropped him to the ground in pain. As Larik lay unconscious, Kim woke him with a slap and demanded to know the reason for the attack. Larik claimed it was just ragging, but Kim saw through the lie and pressed further, sensing something more behind it. Even under pressure, Larik stayed silent, which unexpectedly earned Kim's respect. Turning away, Kim declared he was leaving, but before he could go, Larik warned that once news spread, he could face expulsion. Kim calmly replied that the school would also learn how a group of second graders had been completely defeated by a single first grader, and after delivering a stern warning, he walked away. Meanwhile, Rockdill waited for Larch's call to confirm the job was done, but when the call finally came, he was shocked to hear Larch declaring that he was backing out completely. Larik even warned him to stay away from anything involving Kim, which left Rockdill confused. Just before ending the call, Larik casually suggested reporting Kim to the administration, which instantly caught Rockdill's interest. Hoping to exploit the situation, he asked whether any students were injured enough to use for leverage, and even offered Larik the promised payment again. Larik rejected the offer outright, saying they had lost in an honorable fight and he would not stoop lower. With that, he ended the call and left Rockdill furious. In a rage, Rockdill smashed his phone and turned to his assistant to ask whether she had contacted Desera, and she confirmed that since Desera lived far away, it would take some time for him to arrive. Meanwhile, at Mexico's Valhalla Academy, Desera Ventric sat right on top of a pile made from defeated opponents while casually answering a call, and Rockdill's assistant informed him about a profitable opportunity, where Rockdill wanted him specifically to take care of someone named Kim Juyok in exchange for a hefty reward. The offer thrilled Desera because he had been struggling with money ever since being chased out, and now with this new chance, his fortune seemed ready to turn around. The next day in Valhalla's training room, Kim was ready to train when he suddenly heard Barge's voice and was caught off guard. The Tower Master spoke from inside the sword, which made Kim briefly think he had appeared physically, but Barge quickly denied that. As the young boy began stretching, he questioned Barge about the sword, since the weapon had originally been an artifact kept as a valuable possession inside Valhalla, yet Kim had still walked out of the room with it after their conversation. The Tower Master reassured him that he had replaced it with a replica, so there was nothing to worry about, and when Kim asked more, Barge explained that he had gained the ability to create replicas ever since he became conscious. While Kim continued warming up, Arin arrived fully prepared for the training session he had promised. Yet she was confused when Kim revealed they would start with stamina training and told her to stretch immediately. She followed his instructions while Kim understood in his mind that increasing her stamina would also improve her mana control, since the Academy's training system was flawed because students focused on mana before building stamina. Arin, for example, possessed huge mana reserves, but only the endurance of an ordinary sword-using student. So Kim decided to build her foundation properly by starting real stamina exercises like push-ups, squats, and deadlifts, and as she pushed through exhaustion, she was shocked to learn there was still a 20-kilometer run left. Later in class, Kim watched Arin's progress and felt pleased seeing her improvement. That class was conducted by Lily, the instructor and subject supervisor for dimensional monsters. And after previously telling students to self-study, she announced a written test to check their knowledge of different dimensional creatures. When the test began, students focused seriously on writing, while Kim simply stared at the paper. And when time ended, Lily collected the tests and told them their performance would decide their placement for the next session, before dismissing them and announcing that the next class would take place in the virtual combat simulation. As she left, Barge asked if Kim truly expected to pass after barely writing anything, which made Kim wonder if Barge could hear his thoughts. But Barge clarified he could only sense thoughts related to him, and Kim stayed calm while saying he wrote only what he actually knew. Meanwhile, in the first-year teacher's lounge, Lily checked Kim's paper and became furious, crushing it in her hands while calling his answers complete nonsense, and she declared that in the next class, she would personally show him that monsters could not be handled recklessly. 1 week later, in her next class inside the virtual combat simulation room, she announced that most students had done very well, and after a pause, she called Kim forward. Holding up his paper, she angrily revealed he scored 0, and pointing to the first question about dealing with rock goblins, she showed his answer of stabbing it in the stomach. Her frustration grew as she flipped through the pages and showed that all his answers were blunt, overly simple, and focused only on killing monsters directly without strategy or context. She explained that rock goblins had B-rank defense, and an ordinary sword should not work, yet Kim still wrote he would use a sword and finish it in one strike, so she placed him in a simulation against a rock goblin, and said if he defeated it using his own method, she would reconsider his score. Kim accepted, and casually walked toward the goblin while Lily watched nervously, unsure of what he would do, and when the goblin lunged, Kim reacted instantly and drove his sword straight into its stomach, dropping it immediately exactly like his answer had described. The goblin began cracking and then disappeared completely, leaving the whole class, including Soyeon, shocked that he had done it with no magic, just one clean kill. Embarrassed, the teacher demanded an explanation, knowing that killing a rock goblin with only a sword normally required at least an A-rank contractor, and Kim confidently said he had proven himself. For his next answer, he was placed before a group of jungle goblins known for terrible tempers, and although he saw 3 goblins in front, 5 more were hiding in the darkness, ready to ambush him the moment he made a mistake. Lily believed that even with a sword, the fight would not be easy, yet in the very next instant, Kim moved, first leaping forward, and cleanly splitting one goblin's head, then without slowing down, driving his blade through another's mouth mid-laugh, and just like that, 3 of them fell in the blink of an eye, leaving Lily completely stunned as she struggled to understand what she had just witnessed. Back in the gym, Kim and Arin were soaked in sweat while forcing themselves to keep running on the treadmill, and after pushing far past her limit, Arin finally collapsed from exhaustion. Seeing this, Kim questioned why she struggled so much with the exercise, and she admitted that she had never really pushed herself hard during training because she could rely on magic by borrowing strength from Constellation members. Kim had already expected that answer, since most students leaned entirely on constellations to carry them, which he considered a dangerous habit, because if they were ever trapped in a dungeon with a magic-restricting spell or ran out of mana in the middle of a fight, they would be completely helpless. Thinking about that, he asked her if she found these stamina drills useful, and she confirmed that she endured them only because he had promised to teach her swordsmanship in return. Kim found that response strange, but since they needed to head to the academy soon, he decided to end the session. Arin noticed him adding more weight to his bench press and felt shocked, yet at his insistence she left the gym while he prepared for another set. As Kim got ready, Barge pointed out that Arin had never complained once while keeping up with his training, and questioned why he was helping her, and Kim explained that it was simply because she kept insisting. Barge then expressed surprise that Arin had been able to sense the strength of his sword just by watching him in class, and while thinking about this, Kim noticed Sejhyuk bench pressing nearby and finishing his set. When Kim asked about it, Sehyuk said he had always trained hard there before casually walking away. Watching him leave, Kim realized that Sehyuk's martial bones allowed him to push his body to extremes, and he considered Sehyuk smarter than those who relied only on magic for training. Still, he remained confused about what constellations truly did, and Barge, even though he was a constellation himself, admitted he did not really know because he had spent 300 years in isolation and never fully understood their role. However, Barge suggested that if Kim completed the next quest listed in his system tab, they might finally learn more about constellations. Curious, Kim checked the notification and saw that he needed to go to Valhalla's Eye of the Great Forest at Madagaya House and bring the Heaven Sword with him. He remembered hearing about that location during class, but since he still had lessons to attend, he decided to stay quiet and careful for now. Barge asked about the reputation Kim was gaining after beating up bullies, but Kim replied that if he had not acted, he would have been the one lying there with a cracked head. Knowing he could not leave until he cleared the quest, Kim realized completing it might reveal the secrets behind his reincarnation. In London, at the house of Ventric Mansion, the clan's vice house owner Adilia questioned her men about recent matters, and one reported that a labyrinth had been handled and asked permission to recruit a survivor from the ruined Roberts clan along with another A-rank contractor. She approved, but ordered that their abilities be tested first before sending them to her. As she was about to dismiss him, the man added that Rockdill had called Desera to South Korea, and hearing that name instantly angered Adilia because Desera Ventric was infamous as the family's problem child. Since childhood, he had abused the family name to escape punishment for terrible behavior, showing violent tendencies early and even killing fellow students over trivial arguments. And by the time he turned 20, the family had cut him off completely. Adilia knew Desera was dangerous, but still could not understand why Rockdill wanted to meet him. So she ordered her men to watch Desera closely and send a clear warning to Rockdill that if he was caught doing anything suspicious, he would also be removed from the family. After the man left, Adilia remained alone and furious at her brother for using their family's power so recklessly. And as those thoughts circled in her mind, she looked toward a mysterious door marked with the words, "All for one," believing it belonged only to her. Lost in that belief, she turned to the portrait behind her, showing a figure wearing a beak-like mask, addressed it as her guardian constellation, and quietly sought reassurance while remaining convinced she was on the correct path. Inside the Valhalla classroom, the instructor was explaining about criminals who abused constellation power for wicked purposes, and among those dangerous people, the most notorious group was known as One God. While the lesson kept moving forward, Kim drifted away into his own thoughts and started thinking deeply about his own body and about what kind of potential it really had. He wondered if he also had the talent to control mana while at the same time building a strong and powerful physique, and the thought itself felt very strange to him. When he first attempted chi circulation inside this new body, he had barely managed to finish because of serious mana issues, and his body had been so weak that even basic shoveling work had left him soaked in sweat. He briefly wondered if something had happened to this body long ago, but he quickly pushed that idea aside because there was no point stressing about it now, since this was his body anyway. While he was still lost in those thoughts, Soyeon quietly passed him a small note from her desk, and the note simply said, "Hey," and that small action made him feel nervous. In the next class, the instructor announced that students were allowed to leave the academy grounds for 1 full week, and this was exactly what Kim had been waiting for all along. Without wasting a second, he filled out a leave application and casually wrote, "Going for a walk," as the reason. As he walked forward to submit the form, he heard Soyeon calling him from behind, and when he turned and noticed her hesitation, he immediately confronted her about why she had not replied to the note he had written back earlier. She lowered her head silently, but Kim pushed her again because he needed to hurry and submit the form. She began stuttering as if she wanted to say something important, and that hesitation made Kim even more irritated, and in his frustration he snapped and called her a freak. The insult hurt her feelings, and also made her angry, yet she still struggled to speak properly, and after forcing herself she finally tried to ask how he had managed to kill that rock goblin in the simulation, although her pride made it hard for her to say the question out loud. Just when she gathered courage, Miss Lily suddenly stepped in and asked the same question herself, shocking Kim, because only a few days earlier she could not stand him after he had bluntly rejected her arguments in class. Now she interrupted their conversation and admitted that she was impressed, explaining that she had known only one way to kill monsters, but his method showed her there were other creative ways too. And fascinated by that idea, she offered Kim a position as her assistant. Kim rejected her immediately and said he was busy submitting his leave application, and even when she insisted again, he stood firm and refused once more. Hearing their conversation, Soyeon hesitated and decided it was not the right moment to talk anymore. The next day, Kim headed toward the infamous market. The night before going there, he had been sitting in his room scrolling through his phone while Barge asked what he was searching for, and Kim explained that he was trying to find the location of a place he planned to visit because he needed somewhere to sell the treasure he had discovered in the vault. While searching online, he quickly found the market he had in mind, which was a special marketplace that allowed people from all over the world to trade freely after paying an entry fee. It was often called a black market because even criminals and shady individuals were allowed to trade there. Normally, creating a market like that would be impossible, but this one operated under the protection of a guardian constellation called the Hidden Ruler. And because of that protection, even high-ranking people used it openly, while governments ignored it. Kim found an online guide explaining how to gain entry, which said to leave a reservation comment in order to receive a nearby entry location, and when he scrolled down, he found a link. Just as he was about to click it, a message from Arin appeared, saying she could not attend training the next day because she had to go out. Kim did not mind because he also had plans to go out, and after they exchanged goodbyes while Arin spammed him with cute rabbit emojis that annoyed him, he ignored the spam and clicked the link, which gave him the exact location he needed. Back in the present, Kim moved toward the place shown in the link, which was an old cafe marked as his destination. He quickly spotted the building, entered while following the instructions, turned a corner inside just as told, reached a door, and stepped through it into another hidden world that turned out to be the market itself. Inside he saw apartments, shops, and an unusual purple sky hanging overhead, and that strange sky gave him a weird feeling, because it reminded him of a night sky he had seen 300 years earlier. As he looked around, trying to understand the place, a man greeted him and asked if it was his first time in the market, and Kim noticed the leather jacket exactly as the guide had described, realizing this was the entrance fee collector. According to the rules, he had to pay 2 million won, so he paid and confirmed he was new, and when the man asked if he understood how the market worked, Kim said he knew a little. After paying, he was nearly broke, but he still hoped to earn money inside, and he asked where he could sell jewels. The man suggested putting them up for auction, but Kim wanted a fast sale, so the man told him to go to the 3rd district, where merchants bought items directly, and mentioned someone named Morris as trustworthy. Before leaving, the leather-jacketed man handed him a mask and explained that everyone wore masks in the market because of the nature of business there, so Kim nodded and put on the mask. After some time, Kim reached the 3rd district and approached a trader who caught his attention, and without wasting time, he surprised the man by asking if he was Morris, and the man confirmed it. Kim said he had jewels to sell. Morris agreed to inspect them, and when he picked up a ring, his expression changed as he realized it was an artifact from the era of destruction. Looking at the other jewels shocked him even more because they were also from the same era, and before he could react, Kim asked how much he could offer. Morris hesitated, confused about how someone in his 20s could get such rare artifacts. And when he asked directly, Kim shut him down by reminding him that questions like that were not allowed in this market. Morris apologized because he had nearly ruined his reputation, but then he refused to buy the artifacts because items from the era of destruction were far beyond his budget. Instead, he suggested taking them to the auction hall, where they would get a higher price, although it would take 2 to 3 weeks because of reservations and Kim would have to appear in person. Disappointed, Kim asked what price they might reach anyway. Morris used his phone calculator and showed him a number with far too many zeros, and Kim realized the artifacts were worth much more than he had expected. Feeling desperate, he asked how much Morris himself was missing to buy them, and Morris said he would not even have a fourth of their cost even if he sold everything he owned, yet Kim still offered to sell them at that price, which left Morris completely shocked. Artifacts from the era of destruction were already sold for very high prices simply because of how ancient they were, but there was another reason that made them even more valuable. After that terrible era ended, constellations began appearing in the world, and many of those constellations reacted very strongly to relics from that time. There were even cases where completely powerless people managed to form contracts with S-ranked constellations because of artifacts like these. While inspecting the ring carefully, Morris noticed that it still carried lingering mana from that chaotic age, and all the known signs were there, clear proof that the item was genuine. The fact that he was getting 8 such artifacts for such a small price left him completely stunned. He paid Kim, started placing the rings into a bag, and prepared to end the deal for the day, but just as he finished, he froze when he saw a tall masked figure silently standing right in front of him. Meanwhile, Kim was already outside the market, breathing a long sigh of relief that he had gotten out safely. He went back to the same old cafe he had entered earlier, but this time, the important news was that his money problem was finally solved. Just one glance at his bank balance was enough to make him smile, and even if he spent all of it, he knew there were still more items hidden in the vault that he could sell later. While thinking about all this, a sudden call from an unknown number surprised him. He answered and instantly felt annoyed because it was Instructor Lily inviting him to lunch. Kim wondered how she even got his number, and she casually revealed she had used her instructor privileges. She insisted on lunch again and suddenly hung up, leaving him confused, but after a moment he shrugged and decided to go anyway since he had nothing else to do, and if he could get a free meal out of it, he saw no reason to refuse. Back in the market, Morris stood frozen with fear as the masked figure loomed over him. He asked why the man was there, but the stranger calmly called him by name and questioned whether their relationship had really become that distant. Morris immediately realized who it was. The owner of the market known as Black Cat. That realization made him uneasy, because it was rare for the market owner to personally approach a merchant, and he could not understand why someone like Black Cat would come to him. Black Cat slammed his hands on the table and revealed the reason, saying that for the first time, Morris had submitted an anonymous auction application. The news angered Morris, because anonymity clearly meant nothing if Black Cat already knew. But the market owner explained that he was not the true owner of the market, because his constellation was, and since he served that constellation directly, he could access any information the master considered necessary. After that explanation, Black Cat demanded to see the items Morris planned to auction. Still irritated, Morris agreed, though it felt strange, because even if the artifact was from the era of destruction, it was unusual for Black Cat to show such personal interest. Morris took out the bag, and as Black Cat checked the contents, his expression changed immediately. The rings caught his attention at once, and he muttered that these pieces would sell for an enormous price. Morris felt confused by the reaction, but before he could react, a notification window from the Constellation system began flashing before Black Cat. It reported that a constellation from the opposing side was visibly startled, and that single detail made Black Cat freeze because it meant that Constellation desperately wanted the ring. Inside a comfortable restaurant within Valhalla, Kim and Lily sat across from each other at a table filled with many dishes. Lily twirled pasta on her fork, tasted it, and smiled while praising how delicious it was, but Kim stayed silent and looked away, not touching his food. Lily noticed his distance and asked why he was not eating, and he finally responded by wondering why a place like this even existed inside Valhalla. Lily explained that besides the cafeteria, there were special restaurants meant for faculty members as well. Kim showed little interest and simply asked the real reason she had invited him there. As he finally began eating, Lily revealed her true purpose and said she wanted him to become her assistant. Kim refused quickly, but Lily told him to think about it before answering so coldly, and she listed the benefits, including a scholarship, a chance to co-write a thesis with her, and prestige from becoming known in monster research. She added promises of more access to the outside world, future opportunities, and recognition. Yet Kim remained unmoved because none of it mattered to him. He was focused on something else, finding the Eye of the Great Forest, an artifact linked to his academic evaluation, and his priorities were elsewhere. Even when Lily hinted about sensitive information like details about Choi Arin and his possible expulsion, Kim stayed indifferent, stood up, and said he had heard nothing useful and would leave. Lily grew frustrated and said that since she had shared information, he should share something back, but Kim said he never asked for it. Then he casually questioned her teaching style, asking why someone childish in personal matters was strict in class. Lily answered seriously that her strictness came from responsibility, because in monster hunting, students' lives depended on proper training, and even small mistakes could be fatal. Kim seemed to understand and gave a small smile, then walked toward the exit. As he left, Lily asked him to repay her for the information, but Kim put his hands in his pockets and walked away, saying he owed her nothing. At the grand estate of the Choi Jin family, the patriarch Choi Jin-seok, known both as the guildmaster of the True History Guild and the head of the Choi Jin clan, sat at a table with two younger members of the family. Across from him were his eldest son, Choi Jingian, the guild's attack leader, and his illegitimate daughter, Choi Arin. The purpose of this meeting was clear, because with the selection for the family's heir approaching, Jin-seok needed to understand their intentions. He placed the Blue Moon sword before them, a sacred relic that symbolized the family's recognition of its rightful heir. The rule was simple but cruel, since anyone who failed the selection would be removed from the family entirely. Despite the heavy risk, both Jingian and Arin agreed to participate. After the meeting ended, Jingian approached Arin with smug confidence and mocked her for being an illegitimate child, accusing her of chasing a position she could never claim. His words were sharp and cruel as he warned that she had no constellation protection while he already held a formal contract, so she was not worthy of the role. Arin stayed silent and swallowed the pain, yet her clenched fists showed she had no intention of giving up. After Jingian left, she remembered her mother's tired face and the promise that she should become the head of the family and live freely without chains, and that fading memory strengthened her resolve. Meanwhile, back at the academy, Kim sat quietly in class while the instructor explained details about the upcoming midterm exams. Barge worried about how unprepared Kim seemed, and was surprised that he did not even know the exams were close. Kim admitted he had not paid attention in class, and that mistake was catching up to him. The instructor reminded everyone that midterms in Valhalla were extremely important for anyone hoping to survive and succeed there. The class listened carefully while he explained the importance of both midterms and finals, and he warned that the student with the lowest score would be expelled. With that harsh reminder, he told them to do their best. Kim listened silently but knew in his mind that the written exam mattered more than the practical one. As his thoughts wandered, he wondered how he had even reached this point when his original goal had been reaching the Great Forest. He noticed Barge standing with hands clasped and asked if the Tower Master had ever attended classes, and Barge confirmed it while still seeming unsure. Kim casually said Barge would write the test for him, which shocked the Tower Master and made him uncomfortable because he thought it was unfair, but Kim insisted he would still get help. After class ended, the instructor wished everyone luck, and students began packing their things. Kim was about to leave when Arin approached and asked if they would train today, and he asked why she was asking. When she said she wanted to improve her swordsmanship, Kim realized it was time to deal with her lack of proper training. He said their earlier sessions had not focused on swordplay, but now he would show her how to wield a sword correctly. They went to the training hall where Arin stood ready while Kim held a sword. He pointed at her and asked how long it had been since she practiced with her weapon, and she admitted she had not practiced since starting strength training with him. After asking a few more questions, he told her to draw her sword. Arin pulled out her blade and followed his advice to shift her grip and lock it with her ring and pinky fingers, and the change was immediate. She was shocked by how stable the sword felt, and how the blade's aura settled into a rhythm she had never felt before. Kim watched closely and told her to attack him with all her strength. Arin took her stance, felt lightning energy surge through her body, and rushed forward like a bolt. Kim blocked easily and praised her sudden speed. The lesson continued as Kim told her to stop being sloppy with the mana flow in her legs. Arin reset and attacked faster, but Kim dodged smoothly and tapped her back, telling her to focus on body rotation. Her sword hand began shaking from intensity, yet she stayed hooked on his advice and refused to stop. They clashed again and sparks flew as their blades collided. Even as Arin improved mid-fight, Kim still blocked calmly. The longer they fought, the more tired she became, yet she grew sharper with every exchange. She was exhausted but realized his simple advice was like a cheat code for her sword skills. After an hour, the session ended, and Kim noticed the time. Arin collapsed on the floor, breathing hard and shaking from exhaustion. Kim calmly set his sword down and moved toward the booth while she lay there recovering. As she rested, Arin thought about how much her swordsmanship had improved since the entrance ceremony. She knew she had become stronger, though she still could not match Kim. After wiping sweat from her face, she gathered courage and asked if he would spar with her next time. Kim thought about it for a moment, remembering how talented she was and how her skill had grown since training began. He remembered sensing her talent at the entrance ceremony, though now it felt different because she used a breathing technique. Even so, he smiled because training her had helped him too, and 300 years ago, she would have been worthy of becoming his disciple. When she asked about sparring again, Kim jokingly refused, and Arin accepted calmly, showing she understood. She knew following his guidance would make her stronger. Kim felt surprised by her reaction, but he finished the session. 2 weeks later, at Valhalla Stadium, a huge crowd of students gathered together, and Soyeon stood there holding her sword while thinking that this was her first time returning to this place since the entrance ceremony. Sehiyuk was also somewhere in the crowd and noticed how many freshmen had gathered, while Arin stood confidently among everyone, and Kim, standing nearby with his hands in his pockets, looked quietly curious about what was happening. Barge explained that their teacher had informed them about this gathering 2 weeks earlier. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed when a loud, commanding voice echoed across the stadium, signaling that an announcement about the midterm exams in Valhalla was about to begin. All the students stood attentively as the announcement about the mid-stage practical assessment was delivered, and this time, the assessment would involve a dungeon attack. As Lee spoke, the ground suddenly shook and startled everyone present, and he revealed that they would team up to enter artificial dungeons as several dungeons appeared around them. Students were free to form their own teams, with 8 people recommended per group, though numbers could be adjusted if needed. Kim listened silently while Lee continued explaining the rules, saying that scores would be calculated based on each student's contribution inside the dungeon. A timer appeared showing 5 hours, and Lee warned seriously that anyone failing to finish in time would be disqualified. Soyeon, surprised that the difficulty was set at rank F, took everything in carefully. As the exam officially started, students rushed around trying to form teams, shouting and calling others to join. Soyeon thought carefully about her options and knew her team needed someone with more damage output, but after hesitating, she decided that 6 people would be enough, so she could show her own abilities without someone overshadowing her, and she believed they could work together because the goal was to demonstrate their strength. Lee watched the chaos with interest, and realized privileged students like Soyeon already understood the real nature of the test, while others struggled and formed teams of 8 or even 20. He also expected mismatched teams to create internal conflicts, which was common in exams like this. As the dungeon attack assessment began, Lee told another instructor that in about 30 minutes, everyone would be inside the dungeon, and advised him to prepare and start counting points. Kim stood quietly on the field watching students scatter into groups and enter the dungeon, and he wondered if those who entered first had already started earning points. Arin also stayed behind while observing others. Kim approached her and asked what she planned to do since almost everyone else had already entered. She replied that she would follow his training instructions. Kim, slightly confused, realized she was trying to follow what he had taught earlier, and he told her he was going into the dungeon alone and suggested she do the same. The girl stayed firm and watched Kim walk toward the dungeon entrance. Some students saw her standing alone and asked if she was Choi Arin, inviting her to join their team to complete their group of 8, but she refused and said she would go in alone. When one student warned she would be disqualified, Arin calmly replied that Kim had said it would not be difficult, then entered the dungeon and slammed the door behind her, shocking everyone. Meanwhile, the stadium was now empty, and the observation room was filled with teachers and staff watching screens showing student progress. As students fought monsters, scores began appearing on the displays. Youngkyung earned 2 points. Bae, a girl clutching her backpack in fear, earned 3. Yun, looking confident, scored 1. Lee watched carefully, while another instructor quietly said everything was going as expected. The calculations were strict but accurate. Lee, once known as a clear master during his soldier days and someone who had achieved a dungeon clearing rate of 99%, watched with a critical eye. The instructor noted that Lee's experience made him the best judge for dungeon attacks, explaining how he could assign points precisely. Lee's sharp gaze followed every student, especially noble family heirs. He was especially impressed with Soyeon, who led her team with excellent strategy, ordering frontline fighters to hold position while others attacked from the sides. When a troll smashed into their formation, a shield user blocked the blow and created an opening. Ranged teammates fired arrows from behind, one arrow striking the monster, and Soyeon rushed forward herself and cut the distracted troll down in one clean, decisive strike. The monster collapsed into particles, and Lee watched in quiet amazement at how smoothly she cleared the dungeon, knowing that with leadership like that, she was already on her way to the top. But soon his attention shifted toward Kim. He remembered Kim's first fight where he easily defeated Arin, and curious about his progress, he searched Kim's name in the system, only to be shocked when no results appeared. The search engine that tracked every student showed nothing. After further checking, Lee discovered that Kim had already cleared the dungeon solo in 23 minutes and 32 seconds without any team, and this revelation shocked him because such a feat was unbelievable for a 17-year-old student. Lee began watching footage of Kim clearing the dungeon, and Kim looked completely focused. Kim stood calmly with his sword drawn as goblins rushed at him, and without hesitation, he charged forward and drove a powerful stab through 2 attackers' faces at once. Before their bodies even hit the ground, he spun and sliced an upside-down goblin cleanly in half. For a moment he thought the fight was finished, but then 2 huge orcs stepped forward and slammed their clubs down at him. Kim did not panic, dodged smoothly, jumped over them, and decapitated both monsters in motion. Slash after slash, the entire group was wiped out, leaving the administrators watching in complete stunned silence. Soon after, Kim came face to face with a massive armored orc. According to Lee, this creature had been specially created for the midterm exam and upgraded to match the strength of a full party of 8 people. The monster immediately swung its weapon toward Kim, but once again, it hardly mattered. With one smooth and effortless motion, Kim swung his sword and cut off the construct's head on the spot. As the armored orc collapsed, Lee could no longer even pretend to be surprised. Kim had not simply cleared the dungeon, he had completely steamrolled it. At that point, first place in the midterms was practically guaranteed for him. As other students who struggled through the dungeon slowly began coming out one by one, Kim stood there calmly, with his hands in his pockets, looking completely confident. After the midterms ended, the instructor reviewed the results and confirmed that Kim had secured first place, followed by Arin, Soon, and the others. Deep in thought, the instructor walked over to Lee while holding the results tablet in his hand because the unexpected outcome had left both of them stunned. The instructor watched as Kim locked in the number 1 rank while Lee stood there clearly impressed. Honestly, Lee had not expected the boy to dominate this hard, especially not while clearing dungeons so easily and without suffering a single injury. After a short pause, Lee commented that if Kim continued at this pace, he might eventually enter Korea's professional industry scene and directly reclaim the title of strongest contractor. The instructor, still calm, asked casually whether that title referred to the strongest contractor in the world. Hearing that question, Lee paused to think before admitting he had not seen a true genius like this in a very long time. Meanwhile, the instructor looked back down at the tablet while listening carefully as Lee spoke about the real surprise of the second exam, Choi Arin. Against expectations, she had taken second place and cleared the dungeon completely on her own, even though it had not been easy for her. Lee explained that Arin had always been quiet and hardworking, but pulling off solo dungeon clears like that was something nobody expected. He added that if the exam had focused more on team performance, Soyeon would likely have ranked higher, but since the evaluation was based on individual performance, Kim and Arin were the ones who stood out the most. Even though Lee was impressed, he warned against recommending their methods to other students because what they did was not something most people could copy. The instructor listened carefully and remembered that he had seen Arin before when he was leading the Choi Jun Guild, and he felt puzzled about how she had managed to clear the dungeons alone, but he quickly dismissed any idea that it had something to do with Kim. Feeling mentally tired, the instructor closed his eyes for a moment because he could not make sense of everything that had happened. The following day, many students gathered in front of the blackboard, waiting impatiently for the results to be announced. When the results were finally posted, Kim and Arin's names were clearly displayed at the very top. Rockdill, who had placed 8th, looked visibly upset, turned toward Yuria, and asked if Desera had already arrived in Korea. When Yuria confirmed that he had, the troubled young master immediately ordered her to contact him at once. They left quickly, and were soon transported to Seoul, where they entered a large building. A butler greeted them politely, and someone inside raised a hand to get Rockdill's attention while calling him brother. It was Desera, sitting at a table in a white suit, wearing several rings. Rockdill sat down across from him, while Yuria stood quietly at his side as they began their meal. Desera ate greedily, while Rockdill stayed silent and watched him. Desera asked who Kim was, and Rockdill dismissed him casually, as nothing more than a brainless freshman. Rockdill went on to explain that the boy had disappointed him because of his low background, and that he wanted Desera to deal with him. Desera narrowed his eyes and asked whether he had permission to kill Kim, and Rockdill smiled and said the decision was up to him. Desera stood up and remarked that this situation was different from before, and that preparations would be needed. He then pointed at Yuria and explained that a previous conflict with the palace family caused by her had led to a serious fight. Yuria, clearly shaken, lowered her head. Desera added that rumors from the palace family had spread too far, making it difficult to kill anyone connected to Valhalla. Rockdill, still calm, assured him that preparations would be made to handle the matter. Desera smiled in satisfaction and asked for a good reward once the job was done. 1 week later, Kim was walking down a corridor while holding a written statement. He was talking with Barge, who casually asked if the paper was for another leave request. Kim confirmed that it was, even though he had not gone out much recently. Barge mentioned that he had heard passing the exam gave students an extra exit permit, and Kim agreed. Kim explained that he could not let this chance go to waste because he needed to find his notes, and Barge, looking ahead, asked where exactly he was planning to go. The scene shifted to a wooded area in Suwon, where Kim, wearing a hood and holding his phone, checked the location and confirmed he had reached the correct place. While he scanned the quiet area, someone suddenly called out to him, and Kim looked up to see Desera standing in front of him with a malicious smile on his face. It was evening, and a full moon hung above a tall building in the 7th area of the market. At the same time, Black Cat stood beside a window deep in thought, and after a short pause, a system message appeared in front of him asking about the arrival of the ring. He calmly replied that it was already on its way and would go through the usual process, but as the message continued, it became frantic and repetitive as if the sender was desperate. Watching the looping message, Black Cat started thinking about his past research on artifacts from the era of destruction, and he realized he had never seen such a reaction before. His attention moved to a glowing object resting on the table, and when he stepped closer, he noticed blue particles drifting from it. It was the ring, and seeing it filled Black Cat with relief, because now he could hand it over to his superior and silence them. He picked up the ring box, and the ring inside radiated mana. Holding it in his hand, he thought about its meaning before calling out to the constellation, yet he was surprised when the system message kept repeating again in a frantic loop, as if the ring's arrival was extremely urgent. Back in the woods, Kim stood facing Desera, who asked if Kim really wanted to know who he was. After a short pause, Kim guessed that Desera wanted something from him, and Desera confirmed it, asking why else he would come all the way to find him on such a remote mountain. Kim calmly guessed that Desera wanted to get rid of him, and Desera smiled at his sharp instincts. Kim threw down his bag and removed his hood, saying he had already seen through Desera's plan a few days earlier. Desera's face tightened in irritation as he stretched his hands and called Kim a fool, muttering that someone ranked first in Valhalla should not be so stupid. He swung a heavy punch, but Kim easily dodged by tilting his body, and the force of the missed blow cracked a nearby tree. Desera kept smiling and admitted that if Kim had not dodged, he would have been finished. Kim grinned and casually said the punch was too slow, then judged the situation and realized Desera's strength was comparable to Sehyuk's, maybe even higher, which was too dangerous for his fragile body to handle directly. Kim decided on a simple plan and turned to run. Desera, confused at first, smiled and said that running was smart for someone in his position because staying would mean defeat. He moved to stop him, but Kim suddenly halted, turned around, waved his hand mockingly, and closed the distance instantly. Before Desera could react, Kim landed a powerful punch that sent him flying several meters away. As Desera lay on the ground, Kim stood over him smiling and lifted his leg for a finishing strike, but Desera rolled away just in time. Kim calmly commented on his luck and repeated words Desera once said to him. Desera stood up angrily, touching his bruised face and questioning Kim's strength, and Kim smiled and hinted that Desera should remember his rank in Valhalla. With his face bruised, Desera remembered his childhood in the Ventric family home, where he had been raised only to increase his family's status. From a young age, he showed talent for elixirs, drinking different mixtures that greatly increased his strength, and by 16 he was stronger than most adults. His parents wanted to use him for their own ambitions, but Desera hated being controlled, and he eventually turned on them and beat them to death without mercy. Standing over their bodies with a clenched fist and cruel smile, He showed he did not care about family approval anymore, and his overwhelming strength let him cut ties without regret. Thinking about his life, Desera remembered being expelled by a woman who claimed to be head of the family, yet he did not care. In a world where money solved problems, he grew bolder after escaping family control. He remembered meeting Rockdill, who offered him money, but his interest in Kim was far greater. Desera had watched Kim's rise in Valhalla and his reputation as a madman who kicked out guild scouts, and he became curious about having fun with him. Yet when he faced Kim, he was confused and beaten. Kim stood calmly, with his hands in his pockets, ignoring Desera's questions about what drugs he used to become strong. Kim laughed and rejected the idea that he relied on elixirs, mocking Desera for thinking so little of him. Realizing that Kim's strength came from pure training, Desera was shocked. Kim confidently said his strength came from his own effort, not magic substances. He joked about comparing Desera's strength to Juyok's, which angered Desera so much that he drew his sword and summoned a dark purple blade filled with evil magic. Kim studied the weapon carefully and understood its power. Desera, growing confident, said his strength was rising, but before he could attack, Kim was already in front of him. Kim kicked him in the face and sent him flying, then mocked him for talking too much before fighting. Desera hit a tree, and Kim rushed forward again, striking so hard that the tree shattered and Desera fell unconscious. Kim grabbed him by the hair, lifted his head, and mocked him, saying someone who drank elixirs would not die easily. He said he would spare him if Desera only wanted to hurt him, but since Desera wanted to kill him, he could not let him go. As Kim prepared another punch, then struck again while Desera screamed for him to stop. Back at the Valhalla dormitory, Rockdill sat in his room thinking Desera should have finished Kim already because of his temper. He assumed Kim was dead, and felt relieved it did not happen on academy grounds. His phone vibrated, and when he answered, he heard silence. He tried again, and heard Desera's painful groans, and realized something was wrong. Rockdill was shocked when Kim's voice mocked him, and said that if Desera died, he would burn incense for him. Rockdill hung up immediately, shocking Kim, who was annoyed. He hung up and then looked at the beaten Desera and wondered what to do next. Back in the dorm, Rockdill sat thinking while Yuria entered with tea, but he dismissed her. She tried again, and he shouted at her to get lost, furious that Kim had ruined everything. He knew the news would soon reach the Ventric family, making things worse. Rockdill's frustration grew as he realized the size of the problem. Even though he tried to comfort himself by thinking Kim was just an orphan with limited influence, he still knew he could not afford to be careless. Meanwhile, Kim walked calmly through the quiet woods while thinking about what his next move should be. Barge asked him if he was really going to leave Desera lying unconscious beside that tree, but Kim replied that he would report the situation when the time came, and that he was not planning to do anything about it right now. Barge casually suggested that he could simply kill Desera and end the problem, but Kim said that in the past he probably would have done exactly that, except things were different now because he was no longer Kim Hyuno but a high school student named Kim Juyok. Barge seemed to understand that change and then mentioned his concern about the strange magic Desera had used earlier, saying that the magic felt familiar and that if more were released, it could be confirmed without doubt. Kim listened, but felt irritated when Barge talked about identifying people through their magic, something Kim himself could not do. He brushed it off angrily and guessed that the power probably came from the hidden side of the blade Desera mentioned before, and Barge confirmed that guess. Kim then walked back to the unconscious Desera and asked who had sent him, but he quickly remembered that he had dislocated Desera's jaw earlier. He calmly set the jaw back into place and asked again who had sent him. Desera stayed silent, so Kim grabbed his hand with a harsh expression and twisted his fingers painfully, warning that if he did not speak, he would break every finger. After some time, Desera finally revealed that Rockdill Ventric had sent him. Kim wondered if that was the same person who had caused him trouble before, and asked about Desera's origins. Desera, smiling through the pain, said he was a Desera of the first kind and worked as a mercenary. Kim recognized the term but dismissed it as meaningless and called him a pathetic thug. Desera, clutching his injured fingers, explained that the first species worshipped the hidden side of the blade, and that he had made a contract with the constellation connected to it. Desera smiled and said that if he had prepared better, the fight would have gone differently, and he would have defeated Kim. Kim fixed his hair with a smirk, called him a fool, and said that if Desera had quietly revealed who was behind him earlier, he might have been spared. Then Kim struck Desera's jaw again, forcing a scream of pain into the air. Later, Kim sat in the city and scrolled through searches on his phone, reading about the first species, a group of evil people who worshipped the hidden side of the blade. He saw that everyone he contacted treated them as just another dark faction. Feeling annoyed and frustrated, Kim wondered how to deal with Rockdill, who was still causing him trouble. Determined, he started typing a message and decided to use modern methods to handle the situation. He uploaded recordings of Desera's confession to the internet, including one where Desera admitted his connection to the first species. Meanwhile, Lily received a call from Kim and asked if he was ready to work as her assistant, but he refused and instead asked if she knew any news reporters. The next day, News reports spread about an assassination attempt on Valhalla students by someone connected to the Ventric family. The report explained that a first-year Valhalla student who had gone for a walk was attacked by a member of an evil group, but managed to fight back and defeat him. The student also provided recorded evidence on a dictaphone and handed it to authorities, clearing confusion around the case. Photos of Valhalla Academy and Desera in custody appeared in the report. It became clear that the attacker was linked to the Ventric family, but the student's bravery and the evidence revealed the truth. The freshman handed the criminal over to Valhalla and even recorded the villain's confession after extracting information. The recordings showed Desera confessing that Rockdill Ventric, a Valhalla student and son of the Ventric family, had ordered the attack, which caused serious trouble for the Ventric family as they struggled to prepare an official response. Meanwhile, many people in online comments guessed that the student who defeated the attacker was Kim. Others said the information had already spread everywhere, and some mocked the Ventric family for sloppy work, saying it was ridiculous to think they could challenge Kim. Kim sat with his feet on the table and read the comments with a smile. Barge noted that for someone who had lived 300 years ago, Kim had adapted well to modern technology and modern warfare. Kim explained that by staying updated with news, he could adjust to the present and become who he needed to be. Barge said this raised Kim's reputation, and Kim replied that he had only tried to frame Rockdill, but the media rushed to publish it and ruined the Ventric family's reputation. Soon, an announcement about the Ventric family's official stance was released. Adilia, the head of the family, appeared and gave a formal apology to the students of Valhalla Academy. She said the attack was carried out by Desera, who had already been exiled from the Ventric family. She claimed Desera's confession about Rockdill giving orders was a lie to escape punishment, and the Ventric family denied involvement. Even though Desera was exiled, the family still felt responsible and wanted to make amends. Adilia announced she would personally visit the victim to apologize, and also said that Rockdill Ventric, though not proven guilty, would be brought home from Valhalla for an internal investigation. She added that the entire family would be investigated to remove any doubts. After finishing, Adilia left without answering reporters' questions, leaving them curious about what apology she would offer. Meanwhile, Rockdill, still shaken, watched Adelia's speech on his phone. Soon his father called and ordered him to return to England immediately. Rockdill, terrified, agreed, while trembling as he processed everything happening. The next day, a video of Desera's statement claiming the Ventric family was innocent and he alone was guilty gained over 2 million views. Kim, walking down the street, saw the video and felt confused about the situation. He felt frustrated with the Ventric family and saw their foolishness continuing. Even though an apology had been promised, Kim still felt the situation was awkward. At Valhalla Academy, Kim met Lily in a cafe where she joked that their meeting might be a date. Kim stayed unimpressed and once again refused her offer to become her assistant, though he thanked her for introducing him to the reporter who had turned out to be an important contact. Lily stood up smiling after Kim offered to share some useful tips about fighting monsters, and in return he asked her for a favor because he wanted her help to get permission to leave the academy for the weekend. Lily, sipping a hot drink, said it was an easy request and even joked that if Kim became her assistant, she would let him leave every day. Kim refused again but thanked her sincerely for helping him. Meanwhile, far from the academy, a prisoner transport vessel named L8 moved slowly across the North Pacific Ocean. Locked behind bars aboard that ship was Desera, furious at being treated like cargo. He was being taken to the infamous prison tower, a cruel facility created by an S-class constellation known as the Haven of Deprivation, a place that could strip contractors of their powers and leave them as helpless inmates. Even in those harsh conditions, Desera forced a bitter smile and reminded himself that if he stayed silent and protected Rockdill's place in the Ventric family, his sentence might be reduced to 5 years, but if he failed, the punishment would be far worse. Just as he accepted that thought, he heard someone mocking him, and before he could react, a shadowy figure appeared and cut his throat with a dagger. Desera collapsed into a pool of blood, while the dark silhouette with glowing red eyes watched silently, calling him unworthy of the first species, before disappearing without another word. Back at the Ventric family mansion, Adilia sat across from Rockdill and his father Eden Ventric, and both men bowed to her. Calm but stern, she questioned Rockdill about his actions. The nervous boy apologized deeply, but she was not satisfied, and demanded to know whether he believed such shallow apologies could fix the damage. He stayed silent with his eyes lowered, while she ordered him to tell her everything that led him down this path. Rockdill agreed to speak, and Adilia asked if he truly thought he should take responsibility for Kim's situation. His vague reply only made her angrier, and a dark tension seemed to fill the room as she accused him of acting from pride instead of duty and bringing disgrace to the Ventric family. Walking toward him, she declared his actions had humiliated their entire house. Overwhelmed, Rockdill dropped to his knees and promised to restore their honor, but Adilia coldly said the only true way to reclaim it was to excommunicate him from the church. When his father asked if that was too harsh, Adilia asked if he wanted to share the same punishment, and he fell silent. Although part of her wanted Rockdill executed immediately, Adilia knew killing him now would confirm his role in Kim's attempted murder, so she delayed judgment. She ordered him to return to Valhalla and stay quiet until she met Kim and decided his punishment later. Rockdill thanked her while still kneeling. Later, as Rockdill and his father left the estate, his father warned him to stay quiet and avoid any more trouble. Rockdill, tense and bitter, admitted his fate was probably sealed and that sooner or later he would be excommunicated. With the media watching closely, he could not act yet, but he swore he would finish what he started when the time came. As they walked away, he blamed his father for not protecting him, and the older man quietly replied that the whole matter should have stayed hidden in the first place. A few weeks later, inside Valhalla Academy's interview room, the instructor sat in a relaxed posture while thinking back on everything that had happened, mentioning that the head of the Ventric family, Adilia, would soon arrive, and that she was supposedly coming to offer a personal apology to Kim. Sitting across from him, our boy looked uninterested and doubtful, clearly not convinced by that gesture at all. He believed Adilia's visit had less to do with true remorse and more to do with protecting the family's public image, especially after everything Rockdill had done. The instructor spoke with irritation about the entire situation, explaining that both he and Lee San were upset because the sequence of events made things obvious. A Valhalla student was attacked. The attacker confessed to acting under Rockdill's orders, yet the Ventric family still focused more on damage control than real accountability. The instructor criticized the academy for hesitating to expel Rockdill, hinting that the hesitation came from the huge donations the Ventric family gave to the school, pointing out how money twisted justice inside the academy system. Kim listened quietly, calm on the outside but visibly annoyed inside. In the end, he agreed to meet Adilia, though his attitude showed he expected nothing useful from that conversation. The instructor felt surprised by his neutral reaction, but Kim brushed it off as simply his normal attitude. A knock sounded at the door soon after, announcing Adilia's arrival. The instructor greeted her politely and then excused himself, leaving Kim and the woman alone in the room. She walked forward with formal composure, introduced herself as the head of the Ventric family, and sat down across from him. Kim also introduced himself in a calm voice with an unreadable face. Adilia began by formally acknowledging the attack carried out by Desera, and offered a deep apology, even standing up and bowing before him, something rare for someone of her position. Kim stayed unmoved and brushed it aside, saying it did not matter to him anymore. She tried to mention Rockdill's involvement, but Kim again downplayed everything and called it a one-time event that meant nothing. He said he had already heard that Rockdill had nothing to do with the attack, and since that was the public stance, he had no interest in talking about it further. Adilia felt surprised by his indifference, but kept going, explaining that even though the official statement was out, the public and media still did not believe them. She sounded frustrated yet determined to fix things. Kim, still calm, asked what they hoped to gain from this meeting and thought the entire discussion felt pointless, though he listened long enough to notice the desperation behind her words. Adilia kept her polite smile and changed tone, suggesting the meeting could become a turning point to clear misunderstandings, even hinting that Kim could help restore the family's image. When she finally asked for his help, he refused instantly. Still composed, she offered something more, promising full support until graduation and even a recommendation to a powerful guild connected to the Ventric family that could shape his future as a hunter. She described it as a chance to accelerate his career. Kim slowly stood and looked straight at her with a knowing smile. He saw through everything and understood that her visit, her offers, and her polite behavior were only calculated moves meant to silence him. Adilia quietly burned with anger but held her composure, hiding the frustration boiling under the surface. As Kim spoke openly, she sat silently while he showed his anger, saying he hated how she came to him as if nothing had happened, as if the past could be erased. He asked why he should cooperate with her act, and said he did not care about rewards, only about seeing the Rockdill family face the shame they deserved. That struck her pride hard. Her calm cracked as she glared and called him scum, demanding to know who he thought he was to speak like that. Her eyes glowed with dangerous energy as power surged around her body. Kim watched calmly with a faint smile, not scared at all, even while her aura filled the room. She claimed she came only to make things easier for him, but now saw arrogance instead, and in a moment of anger, she even thought about killing him. Kim still smiled and listened without fear. She offered one last chance, but he refused again. When she asked what he meant, he reminded her of her own words, that the Ventric family had nothing to do with the attack, yet now she was ready to invest heavily in him just to maintain that lie while also threatening to kill him, and the contradiction made her fall silent. Kim mocked her weakness and said if she wanted to act, she should do it, but even if she tried, she could not defeat him. Her anger stayed hidden as she suddenly turned toward the door and said he would regret this. Kim remained seated and smiled again, seeing through her threats as empty words. Meanwhile, Barge, who had been silently watching everything, felt uncertain about staying out of it. Kim turned toward him coldly and said that the people he hated most were those who demanded worship while controlling others, which was why he disliked people like Adilia, and maybe even Barge. Shocked, the Tower Master asked what he meant, but Kim had already shifted his thoughts elsewhere. Standing from the couch, Kim casually talked about going to the gym earlier than usual since there were no classes, and with that, the tension faded as the scene moved toward Valhalla Stadium. Kim walked across campus in his sports uniform while checking his phone, then suddenly noticed Arin standing with another man, who turned out to be Jingian, the eldest son of the Choi family. Jingian smiled confidently and asked Arin if she still believed she could win, mocking her training and saying her efforts in Valhalla were pointless. He held out his hand and told her that if she cared about her place in the family, she should avoid the upcoming selection test that weekend to save herself humiliation. Arin stood silently and listened. When she finally spoke, she made it clear she would not give up her goal. Jingian became irritated and offered one last chance, but she refused again. His face twisted with frustration as he asked if she truly understood the situation, and just then, Kim stepped forward, pointed at him, and boldly said Jingian was a fool. Surprised, Arin turned toward Kim, who appeared suddenly. Kim asked why Jingian would try to stop someone who had worked so hard. Jingian grew angry and demanded to know who he was, insulting him as someone insignificant, but Kim did not care. He replied that he did not care about Jingian's status and told him to leave the academy if he thought he was so important. Kim then asked Arin if she agreed, and she nodded. Jingian, clearly displeased, said they would meet at the test and walked away. Grateful, Arin thanked Kim, and he casually said it was nothing and suggested going to practice. Arin, still surprised by everything, thought about his earlier words and wanted to answer differently but stayed quiet. When Kim asked how she would have replied, she joked that she would have told Jingian everything she thought about him after they finished talking. Kim found her more unpredictable than expected. The two went to the gym together where Kim suggested they train. Arin agreed and mentioned training on the weekend too, but Kim said he would be on a business trip and could not join. Even so, they both agreed to push their limits in that training session. A few days later, Kim is seen walking through the mountains while moving forward with a shovel, his eyes still fixed on his phone. Barge asks if he has come back again to search for notes, and our boy confirms that he has. As he pushes through thick bushes, he listens while Barge talks about the many relics he has already recovered from the vault. Kim agrees with that, but explains that he is now searching for any notes that might still be left behind, because he believes something extraordinary could still be hidden among them. When the Tower Master asks what exactly he hopes to find, Kim smiles and says that whatever it is might help him overcome the weaknesses he had when he was Kim Hyuno. He also adds that if he had discovered it 300 years ago, things might have turned out very differently. Meanwhile, reporters gather outside the Choijin family mansion as preparations begin for the selection test. The atmosphere is tense while Choijun speaks to Arin and Jingian, explaining that passing this test will officially confirm them as successors of the family. The task is simple and clear. They must find a hidden blade somewhere in the mountains, and whoever brings it back first will win the selection. However, Junseok gives a strict warning that killing anyone is forbidden. With that, the test starts. Arin immediately rushes ahead with her weapon drawn, while Jingian calmly walks down the stairs and watches her. He thinks Arin made the correct decision to rush in a speed-based test, because once she finds the blade, he plans to take it from her easily and win without trouble. Jingian receives a phone call. An unknown voice asks about the blade, and Jingian explains that he still has to pass a qualifying test on the way, which will delay things. The voice reminds him that this is already the second time he has mentioned that excuse, and tells him he is late. Jingian apologizes and promises that once he gets the blade, he will keep his word. The caller agrees, and says that a promise made to a constellation will be honored, then tells him to stay focused on his goal. Back in the present, Jingian stands confidently, knowing this is his last chance, and realizes he must find both Arin and the blade. In the jungle, Arin crouches on the ground and feels traces of blade magic coming from beneath her, realizing she must concentrate harder to locate it. After a moment, she stretches out her hand, sensing that it will take about 15 minutes to pinpoint the sword. But suddenly, she feels something nearby and turns in surprise, wondering if it is the blade's magic mark. As she prepares to draw her sword, she notices Jingian standing nearby watching her. He smiles and asks if she used magic footprints to track the blade, and who taught her that method. Holding her sword tightly, Arin remembers that Kim taught her. She recalls a past training session when she asked him about magic. He had assumed she already knew the basics, mentioning that she had mastered thunder magic and understood fundamental control. During their practice, Kim told her to train her magic control over short distances, but she did not understand and asked for help. Our boy noticed her confusion and said she should have learned it from her family, though she stayed silent. He then explained it didn't matter because she only knew how to borrow constellation power and draw energy. She admitted that was true, and Kim, even though he wasn't very skilled in that field himself, told her to relax her body and spread magic gently with her fingertips. Arin closed her eyes and tried to gather and control her mana, while Kim advised her to spread it slowly through her body and feel the magic in the air. As she focused, she suddenly sensed a fiery red aura near Kim, which shocked her. She opened her eyes and gasped, struggling to understand what she felt. Kim asked if she sensed something, and she nodded, saying she could now see the magic around him. Kim explained that this was one way to sense magic, even the faintest energy flowing from a body, and with more practice, she could detect even tiny traces in the air or on the ground. Holding a wooden sword, Arin nodded, realizing regular practice would help her sense magic traces more easily. Kim told her that if she could see the magic in objects, she would eventually identify the shapes of magical traces left by weapons, and with continued training she would clearly see them and detect them herself. Arin smiled, saying she understood. Back in the present, Arin looks at Jingian approaching with a cold, angry expression. Jingian asks about Kim and says he recognizes him as the same person he saw with her outside the Valhalla training hall. Even though Kim looks simple, Jingian has already noticed his talent. Arin, anger flashing in her eyes, tells Jingian that Kim is far stronger than someone like him, and asks why he came there. Jingian closes his eyes with a faint smile, pulls out his weapon, purple mana sparking as he swings at her, and says that is his reason for coming. But he is shocked when his sword meets resistance. Unable to understand how she is pushing him back. Surprised, he shifts his blade, but still cannot believe her strength. Arin stays calm, and slowly moves toward him, her sword glowing with blue mana, while Jingian cannot understand how she became so powerful so quickly. Meanwhile, Kim, deep in concentration, spreads his magic across the ground, searching for a hidden location. He recalls hiding several places around Valhalla, but there is only one true hiding place. Suddenly, an energy circle appears near the ground, and Kim smiles, realizing he's found it. He turns to the left, where he sees a burst of bright energy erupting from the forest, leaving him startled. Back with Arin, the battle rages on. She swings her sword, releasing bursts of bright lightning. Jingian blocks her strikes, but his sword trembles in his grip. He smirks and taunts her, making light of her strength. Undeterred, she continues to radiate streams of mana from her sword, telling him to give up the dual blade. Jingian, with a mocking grin, dismisses her, charging at her with his sword. As he launches toward her, Arin gathers energy in her weapon, preparing for his strike. When Jingian kicks off the ground and charges, she anticipates his move, swiftly swinging her sword at him. Jingian's sword flies from his hands as he falls, shocked by the force of Arin's attack. Breathless, he struggles to regain his balance as the girl stands over him. She observes his fallen form, a bit surprised at herself for landing a successful hit. She then bends down, picking up the double blade that has fallen beside him, feeling a surge of triumph. Just as she begins to stand, a voice behind her stops her in her tracks, and she freezes. Jingian stands before Arin, his sword resting in his hands, emitting a dangerous purple energy. He grins at her, asking if she really believes she can defeat him so easily. Arin, still struggling to process what has just happened, stares at him in confusion and disbelief. Jingian, with a smug smile, points his sword in her direction, asking what she thinks has happened. As she swings her sword, she misses and it goes over Jingian's head. Surprised, she watches as he bends down and skillfully dodges her attack, sweeping his sword in a devastating blow that leaves a bright purple trail. Arin is sent flying backward, crashing to the ground. She lies there dazed, while Jingjun stands tall, watching her intently. He taunts her, asking if she's going to get up, then adds that it would be best for everyone if she just stays down and gives up. Arin, trembling and coughing, looks down at her stomach where a wound is now bleeding. She clutches at it, struggling with the pain. Jingian stands by and repeats that if she tries to get up, she will die. With great effort, Arin manages to lift her hand and, through her pain, she asks him if his contract is with an evil constellation. Jingian, with a wicked grin, reveals that he has signed a contract with a top-ranked constellation to maintain his status. He then explains that he is currently on the side of the Devotees, a dangerous and notorious group. Arin's mind races as she recalls that the Devotees are one of the 3 most dangerous evil factions in the world. She asked Jingian why he has chosen to ally with them, unsure of his motivations. Is the power they offer really worth more than a normal life? Jungian explains that the power and strength they offer, along with the freedom from emotional attachments, are tempting. He adds that the deviation, a term he uses, has its own allure. Arin, still reeling from the shock, listens intently. Jingian squats down beside her and shares his own story, revealing that he was only 12 years old when he joined the Jin's guild. He has been expected to become an exemplary son in his family, though it has never been his personal choice. Despite that, he has no regrets, even as a teenager. Jingian then speaks of a turning point in his life when he met a devotee. The man had reached out to him, encouraging him to join the devotees, promising that it will fulfill desires he has long held. Jingian explains that the man probably understands his temperament and knows he has a deep aversion to people, but he says joining the devotees hasn't been as simple as it seems. It has come with a condition that Jingian has to fulfill. Jingian reveals that the only way to pass the family selection exam is to obtain a relic, a dual blade that has to be found. He tells Arin that if she gives up earlier, they won't need to go through the second elimination test, and she will simply hand over the blade to him. Surprised, Arin learns that the second qualifying exam involves something from her past, something she's forgotten. Jingian reminds her that 10 years ago, Her older sister, Choi Ajin, took part in the first selection test. Arin is shocked to hear about her sister's involvement and the connection to the test. Jingian explains that during that test, he was unable to control his desires. He viciously reveals that he killed Arin's sister on the mountain while searching for the dual blade. He adds that he suffered a terrible injury and failed the test, blaming his failure on the loss of her sister. Had it not been for that, he claims he could have joined the devotees much earlier. Jingian then speaks about her father, who has somehow found a secret about Arin's missing sister in hospital. He reveals that her mother also fainted after seeing her daughter's face in her, and it is clear that the pain was too much for her mother to bear. Just as Jingian prepares to strike the girl, intent on finishing what he has started, a sudden interruption occurs. Kim appears, holding down Jingian's sword, stopping it just before it reaches Arin's neck. Jingian, taken aback, tells Kim to stay out of it, as this is a family matter. But our boy, clearly displeased, mocks the idea of such a crazy family. With a wave of his hand, he sends Jingian flying into a tree. The impact shatters it, leaving Jingian stunned. Arin looks up at our hero, who stands protectively over her, his sword still in its scabbard. Kim turns his attention to her, noticing the blood on her stomach. Realizing her injury, he instructs her to step back. Arin, holding her stomach, smiles weakly as she lowers her head. Jingian, recovering from the earlier defeat, wonders why Kim has suddenly appeared and interfered. Jingian also points out that this is a matter concerning their family, and that he will need to die for interfering. He charges at the young boy, but he easily dodges his attack. Jingian is taken aback, struggling to understand how he manages to avoid his strike. Kim, calm and collected, remarks that Jingian shouldn't underestimate his ability to dodge. He then swiftly strikes him, sending him flying backward, coughing up blood. With Jingian down, our boy steps forward and places his sword in front of his face, ready to strike again. The ground cracks beneath Jingian as the impact from his blow sends shockwaves through the area. Jingian faints and Kim stands over him, watching silently. Turning his focus back to Arin, Kim asks if she is all right and whether she can walk. Arin, still shaken, replies that she isn't sure but needs time to try. Before Kim can respond further, he feels a dark, evil energy approaching from behind. He turns to see Jingian's body releasing a dark aura, signaling the activation of sword magic. Jingian stands up, holding his sword, and mocks Kim, calling him a fool for thinking he can defeat him. Jingian launches himself at Kim, but he effortlessly blocks his attacks and dodges his magic with ease. Jingian, frustrated and bewildered, can't comprehend how his strikes are having no effect. As the battle continues, Jingian realizes he has no choice but to use a powerful, dangerous tool. He pulls a crystal from his pocket, its brightness signaling its importance. With a wicked smile, he bites into the crystal, stating that it will allow him to form a preliminary contract with a constellation, hoping this will tip the scales in his favor. After Jingian consumes the crystal, he begins laughing manically, his dark energy intensifying as a powerful aura radiates from him. As he spreads his arms, the energy surges, causing an earthquake that throws reporters off balance. Panic spreads through the crowd as they look up and see a dark purple pillar of energy rising into the sky. Among the onlookers, Jinsok recognizes the magic, realizing its density is visible even to ordinary people. Jinsok, noticing the spectacle, understands that such an event in the middle of the selection test is far from normal. He decides he has to investigate further. Jingian, standing before Kim, grins and explains that the surge of energy is a result of the temporary contract he has formed with a constellation. His dark energy has summoned a dragon, a manifestation of his newfound power. He claims that with this dragon, Kim will undoubtedly perish. The dragon, with sharp teeth and an imposing presence, looks ahead as its eye that penetrates nature activates, surveying the area. However, when the dragon locks eyes with Kim's intense red aura, it recoils in terror, deactivating its ability. Jingian, confused, cannot understand why the dragon is reacting this way. The constellation's voice informs him that the dragon has rejected the sacred relic summoning and terminated the contract. The dragon, now terrified, is preparing to flee. Jingian, still unable to comprehend, watches as the dragon's power fades and the contract dissolves. Kim, unfazed, calmly leans his sword against his body. With a smile, he raises his sword and strikes Jingian, sending him flying back. Jingian, knocked unconscious by the force of the blow, collapses to the ground. Meanwhile, the leader of the devotees, Han, silently watches the events unfold, shocked by the turn of events. The system screen displays a message indicating that the dragon, now rejecting the contract, wishes to disappear from the mortal world, further adding to the chaos Jingian causes. Han, still shaken by the events, kneels down with his head to the floor, apologizing and seeking forgiveness. The dragon's voice echoes, warning him not to distribute artificial relics in the future. Han trembles, acknowledging the message. As he rises, he struggles to understand why the constellation is so enraged. All these repeat in his mind, and he realizes that the trouble stems from the actions of the individual he places within the Choi family. With a serious expression, Han radiates his aura, determined to find out what is happening. Later that night, Kim goes back to his dorm at Valhalla. He takes off his hood, opens his briefcase, and starts searching inside it. A smile appears on his face when he pulls out the God Arts book. When Barge asks about the God Arts, Kim explains that this is the real reason he has been looking for hiding places. He says the breathing technique can raise a person's magic power to a very high level, far beyond what he knew before. He thinks about the breathing method he used earlier, something he bought at the market, which was ineffective and badly made. Even with its flaws, he used it until the end of his previous life. Kim remembers his battle with the Tower Master, where his weak breathing method left him completely drained of magic. Now, with his new body, he feels ready to begin again. He touches the notes with determination, planning to learn the God art and strengthen his magic. He decides to pause his physical training and focus first on mastering the art. While our boy reviews what happened earlier, Barge thinks about the injured girl and the chaotic situation around Jingian. Kim says he heard someone coming and decided to leave, telling the Tower Master that it would handle it on its own. He keeps remembering the moment when he struck Jingian with a powerful blow and knocked him unconscious. He stood there with his sword, staring at Jinjian's body, feeling confused and nervous. Barge asks if he actually killed him, which makes Kim even more anxious. He remembers being involved in another incident at Valhalla before and knows that another accusation will bring serious trouble. When he checked Jinjian's body, he noticed faint traces of magic and convinced himself that Jingian would survive no matter what. Barge accepts that idea. Kim then remembers going to the injured Arin. Just as he was about to speak, he noticed someone else coming from another direction. Realizing that Arin's family might already be arriving, maybe alerted by a sword mage's presence, he became tense. It was already hard to hide, and it would be riskier with more people watching. Kim warned Arin that her family was coming and, holding his bag, told her he had something to do and would leave. Before leaving, he pointed at Jingian's unconscious body and told her to say to her family that she was the one who knocked him out. He quietly left with his hood on and said Jingian worked very hard, which was why he was unconscious. Arin smiled and said she understood, hinting at the issues inside the academy as her family approached. Later, Kim lies on his bed thinking about everything that happened. He reads his notes and thinks about how he will return the remaining storage stones after mastering the God Arts. He admits to himself that during his last attempt, he could not transfer all the magical power because of his limited magic ability. Feeling tired, he decides to rest. Meanwhile, at the Choi family estate, Jinseok sits at a table with others around him while they discuss the recent press coverage about the family's selection test. An article has already been published that includes a photo of Jingian, and some reports are even speculating that the Choi family might be connected with the Devotees. Jinseok, clearly frustrated, holds his head and admits that the whole situation has turned into a complete mess. He says he cannot believe that someone from the Choi family could be a villain. Jinseok addresses everyone in the room and explains that the association has issued an official statement about the incident and that he has already received it. He thinks about how, in earlier cases, like the one with the Ventric family, silence was chosen as the response, but this time he knows that staying quiet will not be enough because the situation has gone far beyond that. He then turns toward the man in the suit, acknowledging Choi Jinseok's previous cooperation with the police, before asking about Choi Arin's condition. He is told that she has been taken to the family hospital. Even though her injuries are serious, there is no major internal damage, and she is expected to recover completely without needing major surgery. Jinseok exhales and accepts the news, looking clearly exhausted by all the chaos. Another man in the room brings up Arin's media coverage and mentions that she is now being recognized as a genius student from Valhalla Academy who managed to defeat a member of the Devotees, and people are even comparing her to Kim Juyok. Public opinion is changing quickly, and although the situation is tragic, her actions are being seen as heroic. Jinseok admits that going against her own brother creates controversy, but the current story is working in her favor. The selection round has ended, and Arin is now being presented as the future head of the family, and even though the articles are dramatic, they will probably help her secure that position. Still, Jinseok remains doubtful. The idea that the girl defeated Jingian alone seems unlikely to him. He remembers standing over Arin's injured body beside her unconscious brother Jingian. She said she only acted because her brother attacked her using dark magic. Even though Jinseok sensed powerful magic around the mountains, her ability to defeat Jingian still remained a mystery. At that time, other men helped Arin stand up, and she simply said that she used techniques taught by Kim. Later, Jinseok comes across another article about Kim that talks about how he openly flips off guild officers and how his reputation keeps growing. Meanwhile, in Valhalla, Kim returns to his desk, and as he settles into his seat, he suddenly notices Arin sitting quietly across from him. Her presence shocking him because he thinks she should still be recovering in the hospital, yet here she is, calm and composed as if nothing ever happened. As he keeps staring in surprise, she eventually turns toward him, aware of his attention, then smiles warmly and gives him a gentle wave. The students behind Kim quickly notice this and begin buzzing with excitement, asking each other if she really just acknowledged them, while one of them jokes that it must have been a dream, something more believable for him than for anyone else. Kim, meanwhile, drifts back to a moment at home where he was sitting at his desk holding a book in one hand and a glowing white flame in the other, until the quiet was broken by his phone buzzing non-stop. It was Arin messaging him to say she would not be able to train for a while because of strict orders from the doctor, and considering her recent condition and the heavy bleeding she had suffered, he is not surprised. He replies that he will do his own thing for a few days and wants to rest, but Arin keeps sending emojis repeatedly until he grows frustrated. His irritation is interrupted when Barge tells him there is something important he needs to know, bringing up the recent encounter with black magic. Kim, curious, asks what Barge remembers about that magic, but Barge admits it is not just forgotten, and feels like something is actively blocking his memory. Still floating thoughtfully, the Tower Master guesses that the blocked memory might return if a certain second condition on a mysterious scoreboard is fulfilled, though he cannot be sure because it is only a theory. Kim glances toward the board, where the condition seems related to a dagger, but its meaning is still unclear. What interests him more is the mention of the Eye of the Great Forest, which is said to be only a reserved training test for checking knowledge, yet he cannot shake the feeling that it hides something more. Leaning back in his chair, Kim thinks about the upcoming exams where students with low scores will be expelled, and the whole process feels like a useless waste of time to him. He scratches his head in annoyance, wondering if he is just supposed to sit and wait for the tests. Coming back to the present, still leaning back at his desk, he finally decides he needs to investigate the so-called Eye of the Great Forest, because it feels like more than a training ground. Just then, the instructor walks into the classroom and tells the students to sit down, and once everyone is settled, he says he has something important to share before the lesson. Looking steadily across the room, he asks what they know about the upcoming inter-school competition, and everyone confirms they know, while Kim stays detached and lost in thought, silently asking Barge what the instructor is getting at. Barge says the instructor already mentioned the competition after the midterms. The instructor calmly explains that their academy needs participants and selections will depend on final exam results, then unexpectedly calls Kim to come with him to the staff room. Slightly surprised, Kim lowers his arm and asks what this is about. Later, they sit facing each other in the staff room, and the instructor, looking a bit uneasy, says the meeting place cannot be changed, but quickly gets to the point and asks Kim to participate in the upcoming competition. Kim refuses immediately, surprising the instructor before he can even explain. Trying to smooth things out, the instructor describes the inter-school event as a global competition between the three biggest hunter academies: Korea's Valhalla, where they are now, China's White Lotus, that looks like a traditional palace, and America's Heroes, a huge tower surrounded by purple lights. Each academy chooses several talented first-year students to represent them, and the competition includes intense challenges like sparring, maze escapes, and other survival tasks, with top scorers in the practice exam being selected. Even after hearing this, Kim yawns and shows no interest. The instructor, now worried, reminds him of the rewards, saying winners get scholarships and enough wealth to last a lifetime, but Kim still does not care. That changes when the instructor mentions the Eye of the Great Forest. The words catch his attention immediately, and his eyes light up. The instructor confirms that the final task of the competition takes place inside the Eye, which also serves as the final exam location, and finishing the task gives automatic exam credit. He also warns that if Kim refuses, he will have to take the final exam normally, like everyone else. Hearing that, Kim's grin slowly appears, excitement flashing in his eyes, and he finally agrees to join the inter-school competition.